All right, so let's jump right in. We're going to be looking at this really wild idea from a German art book called Wer ist Kunst? Now, that translates to who is art? And right away, you can tell this isn't your typical art question. It's a title that's designed to completely mess with how we think about what art even is. We all start with the same basic question, don't we? What is art? And our brains immediately go to, paintings, sculptures, stuff you see in a museum, objects, things we can stand in front of and look at. It seems pretty straightforward. But then, this book just throws a total curveball. It changes one tiny word, and boom, the whole thing gets flipped on its head. It's not what is art anymore, it's who is art. And wow, suddenly we're not talking about objects, we're talking about identity. And that right there is where things get really weird and really interesting. Okay, so how on earth did we get from a simple painting on a wall to a person, an actual human being called a work of art? Well, it's a story about how the old school definition of art was just completely dismantled, piece by piece. Believe it or not, this idea has super ancient roots. I mean, we're talking Greek mythology. There's this story about Pygmalion, right? He's a sculptor, and he carves this statue of a woman that is so perfect, so beautiful, that he actually falls in love with it. He wishes for her to be real, and poof, the goddess Aphrodite brings the sculpture to life. So yeah, this dream of art becoming human, it's been with us for a long time. So starting from that ancient myth, the idea just keeps popping up. Fast forward to the 18th century, and you get these things called tableaux vivants, living pictures. People would literally dress up and pose to look exactly like famous paintings. It's this weird loop of art imitating life that's imitating art. But the real game changer, the moment that caused a huge earthquake in the art world, that happens in the 20th century, thanks to a guy named Marcel Duchamp. And here it is, the big moment. 1917. Duchamp takes this, a totally normal factory-made journal, he calls it Fountain, slaps a fake signature on it, and tries to put it in an art show. And people absolutely lost their minds. They were furious, they were confused, and the art world was never the same. Because the question totally shifted. It wasn't about, is this a well-made sculpture? It was, how is this even art in the first place? And this is what gave us the ready-made. It's a huge idea. The art wasn't about the making of the thing. I mean, the urinal came from a factory. No, the art was in the choosing. Duchamp's whole point was that an artist's idea, just the simple act of selecting something and calling it art, could change its entire meaning. And just like that, the rules changed. It wasn't about how good you were with a paintbrush anymore. It was about the power of your idea. So this just opened a total Pandora's box, right? I mean, if an artist's choice can make a urinal art, what can't it do? Where's the limit? What happens when an artist looks around and decides that the thing they're going to choose is themselves? And that's exactly what happened. In 1961, a German artist named Tim Ulrich took that leap. He didn't just make art objects anymore. He stood up and declared that his own life, his own body, his very existence was the art. He basically said, I am the first living work of art. And he wasn't kidding around. He actually lived it. He put himself on display in a glass box like a sculpture. He used his own skin as his canvas, getting tattoos as part of his work. And maybe the wildest example? He had the words, "The End," tattooed on his right eyelid. He said his whole life was like a movie, and it would only be over when that eyelid closed for the final time. Talk about commitment. So Ulrich turns himself into a living sculpture. But then another artist, Joseph Beuys, comes along and takes that idea and just blows it wide open. He takes it from one person and applies it to all of us. He didn't just say, I am art. He said, no, everyone is art. And that became his famous saying, Jeder Mensch ist Kunst, which just means every human is art. But for him, this wasn't just some cool slogan to put on a poster. It was this deep philosophical belief. He truly believed that every single person has this massive creative potential just waiting to be unlocked. See? Beuys thought the whole traditional art world was way too small. He hated the idea that creativity was only for people who could paint or sculpt. He had this great quote. He said, "The error begins when someone sets out to buy a stretcher frame and a canvas." For him, art was just so much bigger than that. And this is his big idea, social sculpture. He basically said that society itself is the real work of art. It's this giant, messy, collaborative project. And every single one of us, with our thoughts, our words, our jobs, we're all artists helping to shape it. A nurse helping someone heal, a teacher sparking an idea, a protester demanding change. In Buse's eyes, those are all creative acts. They are all acts of sculpting our world. It's a pretty amazing idea, isn't it? Super optimistic. This vision of everyone as an artist, all working together to make a better world. But what happens when that beautiful, radical idea smacks head-on into the realities of the modern marketplace?
Yeah, just look at this. On one side, you've got Boise's beautiful philosophy, and on the other, you have meat bags being sold online. This is what happens when that human as art idea gets taken to its most literal and probably most commercial extreme.
So the book points us to this thing called the Joblin Factory. It's an art project that takes Boyce's big idea and adds a pretty jarring twist. They say, every human is art, flesh is art. And they have really run with that, basically turning the whole concept into a brand.
And suddenly, that big philosophy is now a product line. You've got things like a flesh phone sculpture, a bulimia flesh clock. I mean, the irony is just dripping off the fact that the idea of human as art in the museum is now something you can buy on a t-shirt.
And this is the real tension, isn't it? Is this what boys wanted? Art for everyone in any form imaginable? Or has this really deep, powerful idea just been hijacked by commerce, packaged up, and sold back to us like any other trendy product?
So we've gone on this whole journey, right? From ancient myths all the way to weird online shops. We've seen artists literally become sculptures, and philosophers say we're all artists. But the book doesn't just end the story there. The very last thing it does is turn the camera, so to speak, right back around on you. It describes this one last piece, and it's so simple but so powerful. It's a mirror. But when you look into it, you don't see your reflection. You just see the words, every human is art. You walk up to see the art, and the art makes you see yourself. And in that one moment, everything flips. You're not just some passive bystander looking at art anymore. The art is now looking right back at you. It's pulling you in, making you part of the whole conversation. And that leaves us with the big, final question that you just can't avoid. If we go along with this whole idea, from Duchamp to Ulrichs to Beuys, if we accept that all the old boundaries are gone, if every human really is a work of art, then what kind of artwork are you?